We are the leaders of tomorrow.
We thought we were alone.
But we've come together.
We're listening to each other.
We're sharing our vision.
We're raising awareness.
We're sharing ideas.
We're building our movement.
We are unstoppable.
We will make it happen.
We will end food poverty.
We will end food waste.
We will eat less meat.
We will make a difference.
We want change.
We need good and sustainable food in our schools and colleges.
We must stop deforestation and make livestock farming sustainable.
We must create employment and opportunity for young farmers.
We must value local and indigenous food knowledge.
We must promote plant-based diets.
We must educate everyone about food and its impact on our planet and our health.
We believe everyone should be able to afford healthy food.
We must be listened to before it's too late.
We're telling the leaders of today to take urgent action.
We are young people from all over the world and we will be heard.
We will act for food.
We will act for change.
Thank you. Hello everybody and welcome to Act for Food, Act for Change session, Global Youth Call on COP26 Leaders to Make Food a Focus. I just would like to start by saying a special thank you to WWF for being an amazing partner and providing such an amazing space, as well our youth leaders and our speakers that we're going to be having today. I'm really excited for today's session. We're going to be talking and having some really critical conversations about the necessity of food being incorporated into climate conversations. We'll dive into some topics that about the food systems that play a massive role in our climate. And firstly, I'm going to give a little bit of a background about the campaign, Act for Food, Act for Change, and then we'll do a dialogue with our business leaders, which we already have here on stage, and then we'll be joined virtually by some really amazing policymakers that have been involved in the UN system, and we'll be talking specifically about topics that are involved in our actions for change, like plant-based diets and stopping deforestation. So we really want to focus for this event on making sure that food and food systems are incorporated in climate agendas and also in the NDCs and moving forward. So great, so what is Act for Food, Act for Change? So it's a youth-led campaign. It's new, we just launched in May, and we're trying to become a global movement of youth from all over the world. And we want people to focus on their personal actions, but we also want to hold government and businesses accountable for the actions that they take as well. So this movement urges business and governments, UN agencies, youth, but also all global citizens to act boldly and promptly to help change our food systems. So Act for Food, Act for Change envisions a world where the Sustainable Development Goals are reached. We envision a sustainable global food system that provides people with access to food and good health, but also is good for the planet. And that's, I think, why all of us are here today. It's really critical that we focus on not only human health, but on planetary health. And so, as we all know, and I'm sure we've all heard these statements over and over again, but food systems are responsible for 30% of human-made greenhouse gas emissions, and it's a primary driver for biodiversity loss, with agriculture threatening more than 85% of species that are at risk for extinction. So we all know the need for action. This campaign, like I said, launched in May, and it's been driven by a global group of diverse youth leaders from all over the world, but also from different backgrounds and focus in different areas within our food systems. We have 30 core group members. We're joined by 3 today, and I'm sure, and Aziz in the room, hi. They're all passionate about different topics within our food system, and they have expertise, and we know our food systems are complex and lots of different things are affecting them. To this day, we've had over 100,000 people globally pledge to support this campaign, not only youth, but allies as well, and a lot of people in this room are here to support food systems. Like I said, we've been consulting youth, and we have over 66,000 youth that have voted for the actions for change, and these are things that youth believe are crucial to be changed in our food systems. And many of them are focused on climate. So here we have stop deforestation and make livestock farming more sustainable. We have ban single-use plastic. Many of the actions for change are related to climate, and this is what we kind of want to get into today. So from this consultation, we know that youth and everybody is focused on food systems and the impact that it has on climate. So without further ado, let's get into some discussions about this topic, and let's meet our panel. So here we have Ran Kazim. He is an Act for Food, Act for Change youth leader from Lebanon, and he is also working with Youth for Nature. Next, we have Patrick Brown. He is the CEO of Impossible Foods. Welcome. We have Lana Wagenet. She is also an Act for Food, Act for Change youth leader from the US and Brazil, and she works with Food at COP, so she's been really focusing on getting some plant-based food into our COP. And then we have Emma Keller, and she is the head of sustainability at Nestl. Oh, Bernice, I'm sorry. Sorry, we have Bernice Cunningham. He is our Food Act for Change leader from Nicaragua. Welcome, Bernice. And finally, Emma Keller, head of sustainability at Nestl for the UK and Ireland. So let's just give them a round of applause. Thank you for being here. Awesome. So like I said, one of the actions for change is stop deforestation and make livestock farming more sustainable. And Bernice, you are an environmental lawyer from Nicaragua, and we've discussed that, how deforestation is impacting you in your work and in your life. Could you discuss a little bit about that?
Hello, my name is Bernice, and I work on ground in Nicaragua, so I will like to tell you a history about my first case, about my first legal case. I went to this indigenous community, and we drive for kilometers for oil palm plantings. And this oil plant destroy the forest. The people that live there, they have to go out. They sell their land so cheap that they become very poor. They have to go out, and there are indigenous people, so they are used to living there. What they have to do after their forest is destroyed is they have to go into the cities and beg and being very poor. This oil palm use a lot of chemics, contaminate the water, and destroy everything. And this destruction has been financed on the supply chains for some companies, such as Nestl, that are buying some of these things. So I want to know more about how Nestl could change these things and how could improve their supply chain and human rights, because this is affecting real people on the ground. And I think that companies has the power to change, and they have the financial capacity, and they have the technology. So I will like to hear how the company could commit to making real change in the world, especially in the Latin America context, to stop deforestation, stop contamination, and give a better world for society. Thank you.
Go ahead, Emma. Thank you, Bernice. It's a really important story. Thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you, Bernice. And it's really moving, of course, when we hear stories like this. And I've been lucky enough as well to visit some of these places, and I'm always incredibly moved. And absolutely, the truth is there is no 1.5 without stopping deforestation. And we absolutely recognise that we critically need to do that. If we lose the Amazon, we lose the Sahara, or the forests of where you're speaking in other places, we will not get to 1.5 degrees, so it's critical. And we put people at the heart of everything we do. Without them, our business doesn't exist, our supply chain doesn't exist. And so it's really key that we work with different stakeholders and actors, young people, farmers in our supply chain. And so as part of our commitment at Nestl to be net zero, we'll be igniting a shift towards regenerative agricultural systems, which really means changing the way we produce and consume and move food around. So that includes oil palm, it includes soy, coffee, cocoa, some of the commodities that make up our products. And to do that, we have to work with farmers, we have to work on the ground, we have to understand their needs and help them to transition and understand what it's going to take. So thank you for sharing your story. We absolutely are committed to ending deforestation in our supply chain, and we know we need to go further. So with a number of other companies, I think it's being announced today with CGF, the Consumer Goods Forum, but also ourselves at Nestl, we've committed to be forest positive, which is recognizing that we need to restore forests, we need to replenish and put back life and support biodiversity as well. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. And Bernice, do you have a follow-up question or a question for Pat?
Yes. My question will be for Pat, and how we see a lot of time that policy, we create policy in a room, but we don't create policy to be implemented in real life. So what happened is that some policies are not good in the pragmatical way. So my question will be, how you think you could connect the real life changes with policies? Thank you.
Thank you, Bernice.
Okay. Well, first of all, I sort of share your doubt about, aggressive policies to address climate change actually being put in place. And the reason that I founded Impossible Foods, in fact, is that I felt that we needed a way to eliminate, basically, the only part of the food system that we need to talk about with respect to climate biodiversity is animal agriculture. Everything else is around here. Palm oil is probably second, but it's a distant second. And we're not going to be able to do that by outlawing it. But the way we can do it, that does not require international consensus, doesn't even require national policy, is to make products that are far more sustainable and make them more delicious, healthier, and more affordable. And those are all doable. We have, just from our own work, very strong proof of concept. We've made now 4 products. One is on the market, 2 are about to be on the market, where when we test them with hardcore meat consumers, they are preferred over the animal product. Okay? So that just says you can make meat from plants, directly from plants, that's more delicious than the meat that comes from the old technology. And so that's how we're approaching it, because again, I feel like I'm all for international consensus, but it just is way too slow to get things done. The one thing I would say that would be game-changing, so I would say the number one thing, if it were driven by climate impact, that should be talked about at this conference, is how do we get rid of animal agriculture as fast as possible? And I'll tell you why, because if we could get rid of animal agriculture, I just published a paper on this, if we could get rid of animal agriculture over the next 15 years, it would, and even if we did nothing about fossil fuels, it would unlock negative emissions by biomass recovery and decay, spontaneous decay of methane and nitrous oxide, which are unstable. When you stop emitting them, you get negative emissions. And I've done the calculations. By 2030, we would have a net zero emissions, even if we're continuing all the other emissions, for 30 years. And eliminating animal agriculture over the next 15 years would offset almost 70% of global emissions through 2100, even if we did nothing about fossil fuels, which we certainly better do. And it is much faster. It acts much faster than eliminating fossil fuels, and it's much easier, because I think if you ask most consumers, which would you rather do? Eat a plant-based diet instead of that steak you love, or we'll shut off your electricity and take away your car and take away public transportation, and now you have to work in the dark and walk 20 miles to work. So it's the most feasible, the fastest, and the most impactful thing we could do about climate, and it should absolutely be at the center of the agenda. The one policy I would say that could be done, though, if there were a price on carbon, the industry would be dead. Because if there was a reasonable price on carbon, because the biomass, the carbon capture potential of the land that's used for animal agriculture at a price of $50 a ton of CO2 would be worth an order of magnitude more for carbon capture than it is for managing livestock. So that would totally flip the industry. As soon as we have a good carbon market with a reasonable price, animal agriculture is dead.
Thank you. And this conversation is one that's been had in many different discussions, and it's the discussion of plant-based diets and if we need to shift to a full plant-based diet or get rid of animal agriculture. And I want to bring in Lana on this. She was the vice chair of Action Track 2 at the UNFSS, and that is shifting to sustainable consumption patterns. And it's really been an important discussion today. So Lana, would you like to come in on this?
Sure. I'd like to ask a question to Emma on this. So Pat has been talking about the importance of a plant-based food system or a more plant-based food system. And I know that aside from regenerative agriculture and working on that, Nestl also has some new plant-based products. So I was wondering if aside from having a few new products, Nestl has a plan to have like a certain percentage of the products be plant-based or to shift towards that in some way.
Thank you both, and thank you, Pat, for those exciting statistics as well. I think we all know that we need to eat more plants. If this room was a giant set of scales and we put on all the biomass in the world, 96% of the weight would be humans and would be livestock. So it's clear that our livestock system has just got too big. Only 4% of that weight would be the wild animals that are out there. So we know that the animal agriculture system is too big. However, we don't necessarily have to eliminate it. And if we look to nature, most natural systems have livestock and animals in them. They're a really important part of moving seeds around, a really important part of nature. But simply at the moment, the system's got too big. So at Nestl, we're a big lever of change that we'll be using to achieve our goal of becoming net zero, is to transform our portfolio. And absolutely, as well as using more regenerative ingredients, that also means a shift towards more plant-based. So we've launched some exciting products recently. Garden Gourmet is one of our plant-based alternatives. We've also launched a pea protein milk, really starting to show what's possible, that we can find these alternatives. But at the same time, we know some parts of the world actually need to eat more meat and need to increase the consumption of animal products for health reasons, not just for the environment. So it's really about giving people choice, right-sizing the system, and where we can, driving that shift to plant-based as much as possible.
That was ludicrous, by the way.
Would you like to respond, Pat? Thank you, Emma.
First of all, to say that nature involves livestock, how is that true? Yes, every natural system has animals in it. That doesn't mean that we should be covering the planet with cows, okay? That's ridiculous. And we should absolutely diminish the scale of it down to zero. And when you said that there are people in the world that need more meat in their diet, no one needs more meat in their diet. You could say people need more protein in their diet, and you absolutely do not need meat for protein, nor do you need it for iron. So give me a good reason why people need more meat in their diet as opposed to more calories, nutrition, micronutrients. You absolutely do not need to get it from meat. And getting it from meat is vastly more destructive than getting it from any of a number of plants that yield much more protein per acre and equally high quality protein. So what's the answer?
I mean, we're absolutely looking at all different angles, and we're really excited about some of the new proteins that are coming out, because I think the other key thing we all know for our diets is we need to diversify. I think if we look at the amount of plants that are edible to humans, there's about 200, 300,000 edible plant species out there, and we only eat 12, which cover about 70% of our diet worldwide. So absolutely, we're really excited about some of those new proteins that exist. For us as well, as a consumer goods company, it's about giving people choice in what they want to eat. And so we want to help that choice to be as sustainable, as healthy, and as nutritious as possible. And we'll be looking to all solutions available.
Thank you, Emma and Pat. I mean, it's a really important discussion, so I'm happy that we've been able to do it. And Lana, do you have a question for Pat?
Yes, I do. So I think you're both moving. Okay, so Nestl is moving in the same direction, even though they have a different end goal. When you hear from large companies such as Nestl that they're interested in having more plant-based products, and I know Impossible Foods is a business, but you also say that you genuinely care about achieving this different food system that's more plant-based and away from an animal-based food system. So does that encourage you? Do you want to help the other companies to have more plant-based? Or is there an issue with the size of the market as well, where you wouldn't want to aid other companies?
Right now, yes. We would love to collaborate with other companies if they're sincerely aligned with our mission. And a lot of people say they are, and if you look at their actions, that's obviously not what they're after. So I forget what the first part of the question was. We're willing to cooperate with other companies eventually, but basically right now, in order to make, you can't just make something that kind of sort of looks like meat and kind of sort of tastes like meat and expect meat-loving consumers to buy it in place of meat. You have to make something, to make this work, you have to make meat that's more delicious and healthier and more affordable than the product from an animal. If you can do that, you absolutely win. That's the way you take down the industry in the marketplace. Because no consumer, nobody wants, they want a delicious food and the nutrition. Nobody will say, no, I'm only going to eat it if it was from an animal that was brutally murdered after a miserable life. No meat lover likes that. So plant-based is going to win.
Lena, would you like to come back?
Yes, I'd just like to do a quick follow-up. So would Impossible Foods be open to open sourcing the technology then to help others to be able to facilitate this transition? Yes, I've actually, in our long-term plan, that is part of the plan. Right now, we're the only company that's making foods that actually are more delicious meats than can come from an animal, and provably that. And so we have to scale that as fast as possible. And in order to do that, we have to be able to raise the money to scale our production. And once we're at a sufficient scale, and people who want to, not many people are capable of raising the money to scale the technology, okay? So if we open source it, our investors wouldn't invest, and no one else would be able to scale the way we are right now. But when we're big enough, that's definitely my intention.
Thank you. And this brings us really nicely into kind of the next question and the next part. You talk about things that we need. And Ran, I know you have a question for the businesses, but also this is a question that may be relevant to our policymakers. So if we can possibly bring them up on the screen. Oh, we have a question from the Zoom. Okay.
Does industry recognise the synergies between food system failures, such as obesity and climate change, their common drivers, and how these issues can be tackled simultaneously?
Great. Emma, would you like to answer?
Thank you. It's a really great question. And I think we're at a tipping point, actually, where we're starting to see people recognise that health and sustainability are two sides of the same coin. We absolutely need to work on them together if we're going to tackle both the climate crisis, the nature crisis, and the food security and obesity crisis that we face into. We face into a world of feeding 10 billion people by beyond the turn of the century, and at the moment 1.2 billion people are overweight or obese, and 800 million people go to bed hungry every night. That's absolutely a food system that isn't working, isn't delivering health, and of course we're facing a climate crisis. So absolutely, and that's where plant-based food can play a really important role. We want to really ensure that plant-based alternatives are healthier and more nutritious as well, to really help encourage that. So definitely, health and sustainability, two sides of one coin.
Thank you, Emma. I think that's a really important point. And Pat, maybe you would like to come in on this, since you are already creating these plant-based items. And how do you work on the nutritious value of the products?
Well, I founded the company not because I wanted to be in the food business. I actually am not that interested in the food business. It was to solve the greatest threat humanity has faced. And everybody at the company extremely committed to doing the right thing for people. We have a policy that we've had since day one that we're never going to produce a product that we don't know based on the best scientific evidence is healthier than what it replaces. Right now, most of our products are replacing, all our commercial products replace meat, which is a pretty low bar, okay? So, you know, we make products that have lower calorie, they have the same protein, the same bioavailable iron, the same micronutrient value, lower calories, lower total fat, lower saturated fat, no cholesterol, no fecal organisms. So yeah, they're definitely healthier than the animal-based products, and we wouldn't put them on the market if they weren't.
Would anybody like to respond or ask a follow-up? If not, do we have any more questions from the chat? Yeah. Of course. Can we...
Thank you for the panel. I have a question for Pat. I personally am in favor of Impossible Foods and similar products, but I've noticed a lot of pushback from both people in the health community for the fact that these products could be considered ultra-processed, and also in parts of the environmental community for example, whether they encourage use of monocultures. So I'm wondering how you at Impossible Foods see these arguments, and whether that's something you're concerned about and actively thinking about how you can gain the support of the wider community.
Yeah, so two questions is processing, and let me talk about that first, and then we can talk about monoculture. So our foods involve processing ingredients from plants, as does pretty much anything that anyone eats at home, okay? Very few people are just pulling something out of the ground and that's their dinner. The processing is just cooking and blending and you know, mixing ingredients that come from plants. When the term ultra-processed is a really clumsy word. The definition, when people are doing like studies of the health effects of ultra-processed foods, it's defined sort of in their methods in those papers as higher glycemic carbohydrates, salt, saturated fat, those primarily those three, okay? That does not apply to our products. So we don't have any high glycemic carbohydrates. The salt in our product, you'd have to eat, you know, more than anyone would eat in 2 days to hit the lower limit of, you know, salt in a healthy diet. And our products are lower in fat and saturated fat, zero cholesterol than the animal products. Now, one thing I would say is, if you're saying, well, they're not healthier than, you know, a bowl of quinoa or something like that, well, we're not competing with a bowl of quinoa, okay? So the idea here is we're trying to get a consumer who would otherwise buy an unhealthy animal product to buy a healthier product made from plants, and I think that's exactly what we've done. But that's a really good question. Monoculture. Okay, here's an interesting thing about, I'm not advocating for monoculture, but it's something important to understand. We use, our primary ingredient comes from soy. The global soy crop contains 50% more nutritionally equivalent protein than is in all the meat consumed globally, okay? And the meat is produced on 40% of Earth's land area. The soybeans are grown on less than 1% of Earth's land area. And again, most of them are used to feed animals. As you know, 95% I think go directly to animal feed. That's what's driving it. The surprising thing is, if we produce plant-based foods, and I'm not recommending this, but if we produce plant-based replacements from 100% from soy, we would need to grow less soy, okay? It sounds counterintuitive, but it's absolutely true. So I would say we're doing the right thing on all those counts.
Thank you.
And we're also looking at more diverse ingredients, but that's a longer story.
Thank you for the question and for your answer, Pat. I want to move and bring our policymakers on the screen because I think we have a question that really connects both of our sessions with the business makers and the policymakers. So if we can possibly spotlight our next three speakers on the screen while Ryan, would you like to ask your last question before we switch?
Yeah, maybe really quickly, and I agree, Pat, completely regarding either choosing plant-based diet. No? Yeah, sorry. So I agree completely, Pat, regarding either switching to plant-based diets or tackling the energy sectors, because I come from a country where we have 1 hour of electricity a day, and so I definitely rather switch my diet. But to Emma, actually, I would ask you really quick though, what kind of instruments would incentivize a country like Nestl to scale up plant-based products, given that the technology transfer from other companies such as Impossible Foods is highly likable in the next 10 years, and as well that the market has the capacity for you as well to enter into that realm?
Really great question, and all of the different incentives and approaches and levers that are out there. So I've mentioned consumer choice. Of course, we're absolutely seeing people start to transition towards more plant-based diets and choose that. So we want to provide healthy, sustainable products that they can choose. We want to work with our farmers. Again, I've said people is at the heart of everything we do. So it's really about working with our suppliers to grow the most appropriate crops in the most appropriate places. And of course, it's working with policymakers to help ensure that food is part of the debate. We're looking in the UK in particular at the National Food Strategy, which is still yet to be responded by the government, but it's starting to set out things like mandatory disclosure on sales of proteins, on sales of healthy ingredients. So lots of different levers. We're also really excitingly starting to invest our research and development into this area. So we've just partnered with a cultured meat research entity, and we're looking at the possibility that has, because it's all of it, all the mix is part of reaching net zero. There isn't one single bullet that we need to chase.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Ryan, for your question. All right, so that brings us to the end of the first session. Thank you so much, Pat and Emma, for being here and your answers. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. And let's just do a little shuffle. I'll come sit with you guys. Welcome on the Zoom. All right. So as we've seen from this discussion already, there has been a lot of intersections between climate, but also the need for work with government and other stakeholders, and that includes policymakers. So we have a really unique opportunity to be joined by some amazing policymakers and those that have been involved in UN processes. So I'm really excited to announce our speakers that we have on screen. Thank you for joining us virtually. We have Dr. David Nabarro. He is the Special Envoy for the WHO Director General for COVID-19. And then we have Dr. Agnes Calabada. She is the Special Envoy for the UN Food Systems Summit. And we will be joined by Gerda Verdung, who is the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement Coordinator and the UN Assistant Secretary General. Amazing. So now, Rayan, you've been really involved in the UN Food Systems Summit process, and do you have any questions for our speakers?
For sure. Thank you so much for joining us through Zoom, actually. Basing everything we've done within the Food Systems Summit, it's been almost a month and a half now since the Food Systems Summit has ended. And I'd just like to ask, how is the Secretariat within the Food Systems Summit trying to integrate everything we discussed in the Food Systems Summit at COP26? And we also realized that COP15 took place a few weeks back. So how is the Food Systems Summit integrating the outcomes from the summit into COP26 as well?
Maybe Dr. Calabada?
Yeah, thank you. Listen, we spent a whole lot of time trying to ensure that we really help the world to understand the place and role of food systems. in feeding people, and the whole idea of nourishing people, in its impact to our environment and what it is contributing to the impact of the environment, but also in our economies. We ensured that we spent a whole lot of energy really reaching out to millions of people, not thousands, millions of people, encouraging thousands of conversations and mobilizing thousands of solutions. So the world is engaged on the place and role of food systems. And that's why young people like you are in the COP26 meeting raising this very question around food systems. So the Food Systems Summit was not a summit where we were trying to negotiate anything. It was a summit where we were saying that we already have things that we are behind on, we already have things we need to worry about, and we need to incorporate them. Now, one of the things that is happening at the COP26, I think what I've appreciated most around COP26 is a sense of urgency that has been coming through from everybody in terms of we really need to fix this problem. And maybe that comes through because we are talking about the 2.7 degrees versus where we should be, and the fact that that trajectory is not sustainable. I think that focus has helped mobilize the world and wake the world up to what needs to be done. What I haven't seen enough of is basically how we will do it and how we'll get there. And because of that, you're not hearing a whole lot about food systems in the meetings. And I hope, again, while we are hearing big conversations around what leaders are saying, I hope that the negotiations that are happening have enough now on their plate with regards to how food systems get to be incorporated, because food system is an industry. 90% of the world's food system is an industry that is huge, that is contributing to emissions. The 10% is a challenge that has to live with adaptation from climate change. So either way, there's no way food systems cannot be part of the conversation, especially because it's the second largest emitter. So we've made the case very clear. We've given enough muscle, enough meat, enough, if I might use the words, and enough really information for this to be part of the conversation at COP, especially for the people who are trying to move forward with negotiations. That's number one. Number two, we have different partners like you all that are bringing the conversation back to the summit. Number three, we have a meeting which you all will be invited to. We are looking at, we will follow up with an evaluation of how well what we've been discussing on food systems is percolating into national development, national determined contributions, is percolating into heads of state conversations, is percolating into national statements and all sorts of statements. If that is not happening enough, we then need to do more. Number four, we are looking at a follow-up mechanism that will, UN Food System follow-up mechanism to the Food System Summit that will ensure that the landscape, young people, everybody, countries, stay engaged in a way that actually can help us track the progress we are making with food systems. So those are the things I would say that I hope can impact how COP26 is working this year.
Would you like to come in? Go ahead.
Yeah. David here. Hello and thanks. I've been working with Agnes Kalabata and with Gerda Berg, and I've been involved in climate summits in 2014 and 2019. We tried to get agriculture and food into the climate conversation and spectacularly failed. Then I was involved in the Food Summit of 2021, and certainly it worked the other way round. There were more than 140 national statements in the Food Summit in September. And you know, the three subjects that kept coming up again and again were COVID-19, climate change, and conflict, as the three big shocks that are really damaging food systems everywhere. So certainly the food people know that climate is a big part of their agenda. So why isn't food getting into the climate discussion? After all, There's a huge relationship, and it's a big one. I don't know, but what I can say is that the future is all about connecting these different agendas together. Climate, nature, food, water, health. They're all linked together. And if they go wrong, it's always the poor people that hurt the most. So everybody, we have no alternative but to require governments, businesses, civil society, food producers, food processors, everyone to connect, and we have to expect them to shift, because unless they shift, our chances of getting to 1.5 are just not good enough.
Thank you so much for those words, Dr. Nabarro, and as well, Dr. Calabada. Ryan, would you like to respond?
Yeah, well, thank you very much to both of you, but I just have a small comment here. So listening to the hopes that you mentioned, Dr. Agnes, and the outcomes and the mechanisms you want to produce, it sounds to me a little bit passive in terms of that the Food System Summit has done what it has to do, and now we're working in silos again, which is what us young people here are concerned about. Why aren't you here in order to negotiate on including food systems within the NDCs? Why do we have to produce mechanisms outside? And then after COP26 is done, we have to come back and look at these mechanisms. Especially that both of these summits are UN organized. So why isn't the UN Secretariat organizing all of this at the same time together?
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. Now you want to reform the UN system and and how it works. No, but to be honest, let's recognize that these efforts build on each other. I'm here, I'm taking part in this conversation. I'm going to be in Glasgow tomorrow, taking part in other conversations. And believe it or not, I've been looking at some of the documents and saying, no, I'm not seeing food systems enough. So I think the point David Nabarro is making is extremely important. It's about making sure that we don't walk backwards. The summit was not really about anything else besides creating the right level of consciousness and awareness of individual contributions to ensuring that we get back on track, helping people understand the role and place of food systems in all this. Now that we know, again, congratulating you all for being there, thanking you for being there, and other institutions that are engaging in this. I'll tell you one thing. I've had a little bit of agriculture here and there, agriculture being mentioned. But like I said, until we get to action, we need to get to that part where people are defining implementation. And if you ask anybody significant out there at COP26, what are we going to do with the money? They will tell you, oh yeah, we need to figure it out. Until we start figuring out the action, until we start laying out and breaking things down, we will not go into a deep conversation around food systems, because we need to understand the different places where our systems are being impacted and where we need to, the pain points where we need to be making investments. So my hope is that the thrust of COP26 was about mobilizing resources, was about helping people understand what is at stake if we don't, was about ensuring that we understand that coming out of COP26, it's not going to be business as usual. My hope now is that as we go into implementation, we see that everybody understands that this industry, which is huge, is the second largest emitter, and there's no getting to 1.5 without fixing this industry. So I think, again, for me, it's an issue of people need to think through the details of how we get there. I think COP26 is not yet there in terms of details of how we get there.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Nabarro, would you like to also come in on this point?
Oh, just to say, yes, I should be there. I've been usually going to COPs, especially when I was working for the United Nations before I retired. But I mean, the reason is a simple one, that I've been neglecting my work on COVID-19, and it's really difficult. The COVID-19 situation's getting more and more challenging, huge inequities and big problems of responding. So I'm afraid I prioritize that. But you're right, in an ideal world, I'd be there absolutely alongside you, because the fight is it's a strong one and it's a long one. And unless we get it right, unless we get food into the climate discussion, as Dr. Calabata just said, we're missing the point. Thank you. Thank you for making it.
And by the way, this
Thank you very much. And I think
Lena
has a question about inclusivity, actually.
Yeah.
I was just adding to point that listen, it's really good that you're asking us this question. Okay. It's really important that you're asking this question.
Transition. So, David, I actually have a question for you on inclusivity, which is about connecting this COP to the UN Food Systems Summit and what was done there. So through the UN Food Systems Summit, I know that you are basically the person coordinating the functioning of the Food Systems Summit dialogue. So for anyone who doesn't know the Food Systems Summit dialogues, that was the main process through which anyone could engage in their country or their organization's dialogue and have their inputs recorded into the Food Systems Summit. And one of the main criticisms that we've been hearing at COP26 is the lack of inclusivity, that not the right people are in the door in the negotiations, being able to access and have their voices heard. So how can we incorporate some of what was done to be able to give everyone a chance to have their voice heard in the UN Food Systems Summit and apply that to the UN climate spaces?
Lovely to see you, Lara, and thank you for all you did and continue to do on food systems and many other things. Dialogues are great because they enable everybody to get a seat at the table, and if they're done right, anybody can contribute. But you know, people are scared of dialogue. They say, oh, if you have dialogue, you'll get the wrong people taking over. You'll lose control. It'll all become a mess. We know about more than 1,700 dialogues that have gone on around the world on the Food Systems Summit, all in the space of less than a year, involving nearly 110,000 people. I've not heard of any trouble. In fact, in countries like Philippines and in Ethiopia and in Guatemala and in Chile, I heard people say it was great, and the more we involve people who don't normally come together, the better the results. So all I want you to do, Lara and colleagues, is stand up for dialogue, stand up for opening the conversation, stand up for inclusion, stand up for courage, and say to leaders who say, no, we can't have dialogue, it'll all go wrong, we'll lose control. Tell them that really they've got to let go of fear. They've got to open their hearts and open their minds to multiple perspectives, because that's the only way that we stand a chance of collective action for the future. We've learnt it on the Food Summit. It's quite remarkable, surprised us all, and now we are really fervent advocates. Anybody who wants to talk to me about organising dialogues on climate or COVID or migration or water or other issues, just let me know. We've got all sorts of tools and techniques to help them, but the most important thing you have to do is let go of fear. Thank you, Lara.
Thank you so much for those inspiring words, and I hope that in the future we have more of these dialogues for climate and food systems. Amazing. So for this last portion, if we don't have any, do we have any questions from the audience actually? Oh, great.
Where do you want me to go?
Thank you very much. Hi, I'll introduce myself first of all so you have a bit of context as to who I am. My name is Kate and I work for the National Farmers Union of England. So a lot of these comments that I'm going to make are probably a lot more relevant for the first section of the discussion that we just have. But first of all, I would like to thank all of the panel members and everybody that's here today, because everything that you've said about food systems being a key part of the conversations on climate change is absolutely essential. We're not going to be able to achieve our net zero ambitions without including farmers from across the UK and across the world. As an organisation with the NFU, we've been quite disappointed in the fact that agriculture hasn't been in front and centre of these conversations. And it is a shame that it's been left up to side events such as this to make sure that the voices are heard. But I obviously do have a few comments, particularly in relation to what you were saying about plant-based diets. And I think one of the key issues that we're finding is that agriculture is treated the same across the whole world. And I do appreciate that this is a global problem, but agriculture isn't the same across the whole world. And we're not going to be able to address these challenges if we see plant-based as good and meat and animal products as bad. That's not going to address the problems that we have. So here in the UK, we obviously have some of the most sustainable agriculture and food systems in the world. We know that our greenhouse gas emissions of beef is about 40% of the global average. But we can do better, and we should be doing better. And that's where the role of science development and research has to come into this. So there's a lot more work that we need to be doing. But I think by just saying, we need to stop all animal agriculture across the world isn't going to solve our problems. Animal agriculture and the role of livestock in agriculture systems is essential. So here in the UK, the price of fertiliser is £600 per tonne. Most farmers can't afford that. They rely on their animals and their manures to be able to produce the fertiliser, which is then put back onto the crops, and they're essential for circular agricultural systems. So purely by sitting here and saying that plant-based diets are going to solve the world, I'm really sorry, but that's just not true. And also, with all due respect, everybody that's on the panel today, are any of you farmers? Why don't we have a farmer that's from the UK involved in these conversations? Because they'll be able to bring a fresh perspective on this. We have so many farmers that are here in the UK that are doing fantastic things. I had one with the NFU with us yesterday, a guy called James, who's a farmer in Yorkshire. He's a regenerative farming, and he is almost net zero. He's doing fantastic things, and he relies on his livestock and animals to be able to achieve those goals. So, sorry, I feel like I've probably taken the mic for too long. I'm really happy to have a chat to anybody who wants to after this. Very passionate about it, about UK agriculture and agriculture in general. So, thank you.
Thank you. And I mean, this is exactly what Dr. Nabarro had just talked about. We need to be discussing things that we feel like need to be discussed, and that's a dialogue. Thank you for sharing. But we need to move on to our last section, and we're going to do a little bit of a switch up. We are going to get a question for the youth, and I would like to welcome Gerda to ask a question to our youth.
Gerda, you're on mute. You're on mute, Gerda. You're on mute.
I was listening and fascinated by this conversation. But I would like to ask the question, what needs to happen to make sure that you young leaders, youth leaders, are not accepting this anymore, the siloed approach between food, climate, creating prosperity, etc., and bring down the silos for good, and make sure that you and the people surrounding Greta Thunberg are working hand in hand and never let go each other anymore. My second question, and connected to this one, is how can we support you to do this?
Now we'll hear from Bernice.
Hello. So one of the reasons that I am in Act for Food, Act for Change, is because it's not Tag for Food, Tag for Change. One of the things that I want to say is that we need to stop talking. We talk and talk and talk every year, and we don't get real solutions. So I will say that the UN system need to stop talking and stop doing stuff on the ground where the youths are. And that's one of the reasons that I am this campaign, is because we are working on ground with youths that are producing food, that youths that are facing human rights violations, that youth that are building water system. So I really think that there's no more time to talk. It's time to act for food and act for change. Thank you.
Bernice,
Lana.
please answer my question. Answer my question because I'm asking you
acting for food and change. We also need to get into the specifics. Start talking about what actually needs to be done concretely and having those also regional conversations and connected conversations instead of just saying, oh, we need to act on climate. Nature is important. No, we need to go and incorporate sustainability into the national dietary recommendations. We need to have policy that bans factory farming. We need to have these specifics, recommendations that go into action instead of just saying vague comments that sound good, which we often see in these kinds of conferences.
Thank you, Lana. And
I think she had something to say. Just double check.
Gerda, would you like to comment on Bernice or Lana's answers?
Yeah, I have to say I don't think that Bernice was really responding to my question. I was asking myself how to get the action that is so that you are urging for and that is recognized by all of us. Break down the siloed approach, get all interests together, because only if we interconnect, we will be able to find solutions. And I think young people should lead on this. So my question is, how do you make sure that from now on, from COP26, you and the young people supporting or aligning behind Greta Thunberg are working hand in hand and never allow anymore to have a siloed approach?
And I'm going to elaborate a little bit more. We have been talking about COP for 26 years. 26 years. Just imagine this conversation that had been going and going and going. And that's why my point was acting, because we already know what some of these solutions are. I don't think we should go another 26 years talking about these solutions. And how we unite the movement, definitely that's a great question, because I think that the environmental movement doesn't have unity. I think we need to do more networking between the organizations. And one of the things that I think it will be fundamental is to engage in a political project that we all believe, but is not very clear at this moment. And the other thing that I think will help to organize the youth is finance. Most of these youths doesn't have the opportunity to be here. And Ryan was talking about inclusion. Like in this COP, you cannot get to the plenaries. You cannot see actually the negotiations. They just live in the parties there. So I think it's very important that the inclusion of youths is real, and definitely Greta Thunberg is a great example, but I think there are more youths around the world that have different problems, and I don't think we should make this about a person. I think we should make this about an issue, not a person. I know she's a celebrity and I really support her, but I don't think the whole movement should unite against a person. It should be unite against a movement. For example, in Colombia, they shoot people, they shoot youngs, they actually kill you for being an activist, and in Latin America it's very dangerous to do it. So even if we have Greta, that I think is very important, and the work that she's been doing, I don't think the whole movement should just be about one person. It should be about the real issues and the real problems that we're facing in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernice.
And that is exactly what
Ryan,
I'm
would you like
asking,
to answer
Bernice.
quickly?
Yeah, really quickly. The issue about silos, us youth have been representing the holistic overview on food systems within the Food Systems Summit, COP26 and COP15 and other summits. The issue is that the UN has not formalized our involvement within these summits yet. We're still coming to the Food Systems Summit, speaking about the same issues. We, as youth, we come here as well and we speak the same issues, and then we go to other summits and we speak the same issues. So this has to come from the top and not from us, because we're involving ourselves in your summits and you're working in silos. And so the thing is that us youth, we hold ourselves accountable to our promises, unlike the decision makers who went to the Food Systems Summit. They made their political commitments. They came here and they didn't do anything about it. They should be including it in the NDCs. And so we're raising points regarding farmers' rights at COP26, which is not a topic that is raised. And so we're always working holistically and not in silos, but we need to be formalized in order to remove those silo barriers.
Thank you, Rayan. And Gerda, I hope that we answered your question. Would you just like to do some final remarks in 1 minute? We have not a lot of time.
Thank you very much for a great event. Act for Food, Act for Change. I very much like your top 10 of actions that are in the program, and I embrace them. However, I think that the discussion needs to be more on how to get the right actions and how to make it happen. And I would like to have a further conversation with you, because I don't think we all will make much progress if we don't identify the how of getting things connected. I don't think that we need to work all behind Greta, because this is not about persons. What I meant to say is, how do we connect the agenda, the interests of people, the people's agenda, the planet's agenda, and the prosperity agenda together, just like Agnes and David have emphasized. And how? Because that is the next question, how to make sure that solutions that are found can be owned by people. For instance, the farmer that was speaking up in the last round of participants. I'm a farmer's daughter. I can put myself exactly in her shoes, and I feel her pain. And she needs to be at the table, because she also knows what and how she wants to have things change, to get things changed, so that she can and other farmers can have a more prosperous future. So my point is here that the Food Systems Summit has made people, planet, and prosperity agenda items, and health, of course, and social protection, and water, and what have you, brought it together. Now it's up to us. Don't leave it to the UN alone. You are there, civil society is there, businesses should take their responsibility as well to make sure these silos are taken down and are transferred into bridges to work hand in hand from a country perspective. Because that is where I would like to emphasize. You are all from a country, be it from Colombia, be it from Southeast Asia, be it from somewhere else. Act at the country level and be bold, because I don't, as coordinator of the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement, a movement of 64 countries where different stakeholders and different sectors are working together to improve nutrition, all forms, fighting all forms of malnutrition. I think food and nutrition, healthy food and affordable food, should be part of election campaigns. So the next time, why don't you run to be the mayor of a society, of a community, or a city? Why don't you be involved in a region, or even up to parliament? Because then you can set the agenda. And I'm not telling that all of you need to go into parliament, but you need to move on and become decision makers, not waiting anymore until somebody is opening the door or setting an agenda that you like. Take a step forward. That is what people recommended me, because once, years ago, I was where you are right now, and people said, okay, if you want to have a seat at the table, go for it, but get it. Don't wait for us to make place, because we have our own interests and we want to keep these negotiations about COP26 behind closed doors, otherwise the agenda will be too complicated. We need to make the agenda complicated, and for that reason, the knock on the door never should stop again. How? Become involved in elections, become involved in the development of the food system in your own country or in your own region. Work from there with carrots and sticks, doing the naming and faming of those partners who are really making progress, and doing the naming and shaming for those who are not acting. Because we can continue to ask big companies to change their behavior, but they will continue to explain why their intentions are so good, etc. But they need to change from inside out. How? Through standing up for action and bringing things together. I think the coalitions for the planet, the coalitions for the future, the coalitions for food and for change need to work hand in hand. Don't just don't accept anymore a siloed approach. And I think the country pathways of the Food Systems Summit can drive this way of bringing the different sectors and the different stakeholders, including young people, including farmers, including women food producers, including consumers together. And then two final points. I think you are right, the agenda for the COPs needs to change. We shouldn't leave this here. So I'm ready to work with you to, after this COP has closed, to make sure that in the next COP, all the other things are included, that a siloed approach will be history, so that COP27 will be an inclusive COP, where the topics are brought together in a joint agenda, complicated, but a joint agenda, because one without the other will not move forward, and make sure that the invitation and, if need be, the pressure will be put on the organizers to come forward with the agenda, and not only for side events, but for realistic negotiations and progress.
Thank you, Gerda.
Finally, I heard the discussion about meat or no meat, Nestl, sustainable development.
I'm sorry,
we
Gerda,
can continue
we have to
this
wrap up.
conversation forever, but I think big companies need to be transformed from inside out. So my suggestion to you would be, please focus also on getting investors and shareholders change their opportunity. Look what is happening right now with big oil companies. They are steered into the right direction, where the CEOs are still holding back. For instance, Shell, Exxon, what have you, they are holding back, and they say, no, wait and see, we slowly. But the investors and the stakeholders and the shareholders, they do say, no, you need to change your agenda. We want you.
Thank you,
as
Gerda.
energy
I'm really sorry, we have to cut you off.
Part of the solution. With this, proud of you all the best.
Well, thank you so much. Really, really amazing words. And you've heard it. We have to move forward and put food on climate agendas, and we have to do it together. So thank you so much for all of our speakers, both panels and the youth leaders, as well as the WWF team. Thank you, everybody in the audience.